No longer wrong myself for the Phoenix man, Michael Carter. He kept complaining, over and over, that the food for his repeat year class was terrible, so I turned around and bought myself an expensive cream cake. He said the dorm had no heat and it was freezing, so I immediately bought an electric heater for my rented room. He got angry and gave me the silent treatment, right up until the homeroom teacher mentioned I hadn't paid his materials fee. Only then did he confront me. "Natalie Bennett, why don't you care about me anymore?" I smiled calmly and said, "Because I don't love you anymore." After all, in my previous life, I had given up the chance to go to college for him. I entered the factory early, waking before dawn and working late into the night to fund his repeat year. And he repeated only to chase his unattainable white moonlight, Emily Quinn. This time, Peking University would be the brand new starting point of my life. When I burst out laughing at the factory, my coworkers thought I had lost my mind. My hand trembled as I wiped the tears from the corner of my eyes. No one knew I had been reborn in 1979. I was 18 years old, 8 months away from the college entrance exam. I still had a chance to go to university. My life could start over. I couldn't wait to toss aside the needle and thread in my hands and stand up from my chair. A coworker looked up at me and said, "Natalie, the floor manager said no bathroom breaks during work hours. If they catch you, they'll dock your pay." But my resolve was set. In a clear, loud voice, I said, "I'm quitting." Every gaze in the workshop landed on me. "Girl, you're really not going to support your boyfriend's repeat year? Jobs are hard to find these days." I smiled. "I'm going to take the college entrance exam. As for his tuition and living expenses, he'll have to figure them out himself." I took off my work badge, shed the course uniform, and walked away without hesitation. Michael and I were both orphans who attended the same elementary school on government assistance. He was luckier than I was, adopted by an elderly man who lived alone. When our hearts first began to stir, we promised to get into Peking University together. He was an excellent student, yet he failed the college entrance exam. As he decided to repeat a year, his adoptive father developed severe Alzheimer's. When I learned what was happening, I gave up my admission notice to Peking University, which was already in hand, and willingly stayed in Sichuan to support his studies. Back then, Michael hugged me with reddened eyes and said he would work hard to get into college, then work even harder to earn money so I could sit for the exam again. I nestled in his arms and believed every word. In the summer of 1980, he finally got into Peking University. But his studies were demanding, and there was no one to care for his aging adoptive father. He wanted me to stay and see the old man through his final years, saying I was all he had left. He promised that once his father passed, he would be by my side when I took the college entrance exam again. So I waited until 1984. That year, the elderly man died, and Michael graduated smoothly. I moved to Beijing, full of joy and ready for the exam. Then I got pregnant. Michael wanted me to have the baby first. He said a woman should have children, and it wouldn't be too late to take the exam afterward. The pregnancy symptoms tormented me so badly that I could only compromise. In 1986, I gave birth to our son. After that, I never brought up the exam again, because my son simply couldn't be without me. Hungry, he wanted me. Crying, he wanted me. Sick, he still wanted me. I finally reached the Beijing I'd longed for at 25, yet I was tied down by my child until I was 30. When he could at last manage on his own, I was ferrying him to and from school. I compromised again and again until he married and gave me a grandson, and still I was never truly free. Half of my life was nothing but Michael talking, or our son talking. No one ever listened to me. Just as I was trying to comfort myself and accept the status quo, I accidentally came across Michael's diary. He had always said a diary was private, so for years I never dared touch it. But hundreds of entries were nothing but his love for Emily Quinn. It turned out his failure back then wasn't an accident at all. It was a bold gambit to chase the woman he truly loved. When Emily Quinn repeated a year, Michael Carter deliberately filled in wrong answers just so he could stay by her side. When she complained about the cafeteria food, he brought her expensive fruitcakes. When she felt cold, he skipped class to buy her a scarf and gloves made of lanolin wool. And all that money came from my work. every stitch I embroidered at the factory. It turned out that everything I had sacrificed had only served someone else. My whole body trembled with rage. I demanded, "Since you've fallen in love with someone else, why did you even marry me?" Michael snatched the diary from my hands, his eyes cold and distant. "Who said you could read my diary? You're just a housewife who's never even been to college. Can you even read all the words in it? Don't assume everyone's as filthy-minded as you are." I froze where I stood. If not for him, how could I have possibly missed my chance at college? And now he despised me for being uneducated. I couldn't understand it. Where had the Michael who once looked at me as if I were his whole world gone? My chest ached sharply. I no longer argued with him. I picked up a small suitcase and left. My son tried to follow me, but Michael stopped him. "This house is mine. She doesn't have anywhere else to go. She'll be back in a few days." Just as he predicted, I didn't see my son come after me again. I was crushed with disappointment. Dazed, I walked straight into a car accident. Lying in a pool of blood, the pain in my heart was deeper than the pain in my body. I had spent most of my life revolving around Michael and our son, and in the end, all I had left were these old bones, broken by the collision. Nothing else. When my mind cleared, I was sitting in the small rented room, clenching my teeth until my jaw ached. Since I'd been given a second chance, it had to be a gift from heaven. I excitedly set up a study plan, allocated my savings, then the lock turned, and 2 people walked in. As expected, one of them was Michael, but behind him was a beautiful young woman. Michael clearly hadn't expected to find me here, since I should have been working the night shift at the factory. For a moment, panic flashed in his eyes. "Why are you back?" Before I could answer, the girl behind him shivered from the cold, and Michael didn't bother pressing me. I immediately pulled her inside. "This is Emily Quinn, the class president of my repeat year program," Michael said. Emily's skin was pale, her eyes were large, and she wore a stylish jacket that made her look full of energy. When she noticed me staring at her, she smiled sweetly. "Hi, sis." Before I could reply, she turned and walked straight into the bathroom. Seeing how naturally she acted, Michael explained slowly. "Emily is my classmate. Her dorm is too noisy, so it's bad for studying. I decided to let her stay here for a while." His self-righteous tone made my anger flare. Back when I had wanted to live in the factory dorms, Michael had insisted I rent an apartment instead, so he could visit me during holidays. Even though that made my financial burden heavier, I happily agreed, just for the chance to see him, and even gave him a spare key. But now, looking at the situation, I wasn't so sure why this apartment had really been rented. When I stayed silent, he added, "Next time, let me know before you come back, otherwise the bed's too small and she'll be uncomfortable." He busied himself making up the floor bed, then placed my pajamas outside the bathroom door, acting like the rightful owner of the place. I stood there watching him finish laying the bedding, then went to the kitchen, came back with a basin of hot water, and dumped it right over him. The bedding on the floor was soaked, steam rising into the damp, cold air. Michael yelped from the scalding heat and jumped up instantly, his brows furrowed in growing anger. "What the hell are you doing?" Expressionless, I said, "Washing the filth." He was about to explode when Emily stepped out of the bathroom. Emily looked at the mess on the floor and softly asked, "Michael, what happened here?" Michael Carter instantly changed his tone, forcing a smile. "Nothing. Natalie accidentally spilled water on the bedding." I stood to the side, my voice steady and without a ripple. "I never said it was an accident. I did it on purpose." Michael's brows knit tightly, his tone carrying a warning. "Natalie Bennett, have you been working so much that you've lost your mind? What nonsense are you talking about?" Then he turned to Emily, his eyes soft. "Your pajamas are thin. Be careful not to catch a chill. Go get some rest." Emily's gaze lingered on Michael first, then shifted to me, her whole demeanor dripping with wounded innocence. "Sis, the bedding's wet, so Michael doesn't have a place to sleep. I'll just go back to my dorm and squeeze in with my classmates. I don't want to trouble you." She turned to leave, but Michael grabbed her arm. "It's not safe for a girl to go back this late at night. You stay here. I'll go back to the factory with Natalie and make do for one night." Emily's eyes reddened, tears brimming as she spoke in a choked voice. "Forget it, Michael. Your wife doesn't welcome me, I can tell. I just won't come again. Michael grew anxious, turning to grab my hand, his grip pulling painfully. You stay here. I'll leave with her right now. I yanked my hand free, the resentment I'd been holding back finally bursting out. Michael Carter, this is my rented apartment. How can you be so shameless? He froze, as if he hadn't expected me to speak to him that way, his eyes filled with confusion. Natalie, what's yours and mine? Why are you drawing lines between us? I gave a cold laugh. Don't call me Natalie, call me Mom. After all, I've fed you, clothed you, paid for your repeat year, and now I'm even funding you to find another woman. What's the difference between you and a son? Michael's throat tightened as he tried to defend himself. Natalie Bennett, the money you've spent on me, I'll pay you back someday. Do you really have to be like this? I slapped him hard across the face. Who gave you permission to call your mother by her name? The sound of the slap echoed crisply through the small apartment. Michael stared at me, wide-eyed, completely stunned. Emily stepped in front of him, her tone full of reproach. How can you hit someone like that? You're acting like a complete shrew. I lowered my aching left hand, then raised my right and slapped her just as hard. A mother has every right to discipline her son. And you, an outsider, what right do you have to butt in? Emily clutched her face, tears spilling over, and Michael immediately pulled her behind him. His own face flushed with anger. Natalie Bennett, you've lost your mind. I shoved a piece of paper at him. Sign it. Michael frowned as he picked it up, but the moment he read it, the false mask slipped from his face. It was an IOU. I glanced at him coolly. The money I've spent on you lately, you're gonna pay it back. I'll only feel at ease with your signature on it. He gripped the IOU tightly, as if he couldn't believe I was serious. Emily, seeing his hesitation, snatched it from him, read it, and said mockingly, It's just a few lousy bucks. Sign it. A flicker of irritation crossed Michael's face, but because of Emily, he didn't lash out. I stared at him coldly. You have 1 month. If you don't pay me back in that time, it'll be 10 times the amount. Michael clenched his teeth. I already explained things to you. What are you still mad about? My gaze shifted between Emily and Michael before curling into a mocking smile. With the two of you like this, do you really think you're worth my anger? Get out. Don't waste my time. Michael, clearly swallowing his pride, grabbed Emily, who was still glaring at me, and left. His face dark as iron. I took back the spare key, and early the next morning I went to find a locksmith to change the lock. I also bought an electric heater to keep warm while I studied. In my previous life, I had been stupid enough to warm myself just to warm others, and in the end, all I had left was the ashes of a withered weed. In this life, no one was going to stop me from changing my fate. Relying on my memory and experience, I didn't sign up for any prep classes. I bought study materials myself and reviewed on my own. The college entrance exam had only been reinstated a few years ago, and competition was at its fiercest. I didn't dare waste a single moment. When I finally took some time to buy groceries, the old man who watched over the public phone booth called out to me, Natalie, Michael called for you today. I smiled at him. We broke up a long time ago. He must have called the wrong number. Then I hurried off to the market. When I returned home, I saw Michael Carter standing there holding a roasted sweet potato. He was tall and clean-cut, and the old man, who knew him well, was pouring him hot water. He might have looked like a decent person, but I knew his heart was black. I approached with a blank expression. The moment he saw me, he quickly stepped forward. Natalie, why didn't you answer my calls? I didn't even look at him, just walked silently toward the door. He trailed after me, step by step. Are you still mad? There's really nothing between me and Emily. She's helped me a lot. I couldn't just refuse to lend her a bed. I stopped in my tracks. The apartment you lent her? Was it one you rented? His face faltered slightly. I didn't think it through. I thought we didn't draw lines like that between us. I gave a cold snort. I'm working my hands to the bone in the factory while you're out chasing women. Oh, I think you've been very thoughtful indeed. Michael's brows furrowed deeper. Natalie Bennett, I skipped class to come explain things as clearly as I could. How long are you going to keep throwing a fit? He grabbed my arm hard, his tone impatient. I pried his hand off. We're breaking up. Leave. Michael didn't take my words seriously, assuming I was just jealous and sulking. He even tried to hug me. In the scuffle, my small vocabulary notebook fell from my pocket. Michael snatched it up before I could react. "You're memorizing vocabulary even while working in the factory?" I grabbed it from his hand. "That's none of your business." He stared at me sharply. "Don't tell me you're preparing for the college entrance exam again?" I didn't answer. His mouth curled slightly, as if he found it ridiculous. "Natalie, you won't pass. The only reason you got in before was luck. Now you've been out of school for almost half a year. Do you think the college entrance exam is something you can just decide to pass?" The sneer on his face overlapped perfectly with the man I remembered from my previous life. My voice was ice cold. "I don't need your opinion." Michael glared at me. "Fine, but when you're exhausted, don't come to me complaining. And remember, you promised to support my repeat year. The materials fee is due soon. Don't go back on your word just because you're studying." I let out a short, incredulous laugh and strode away. Support him for another repeat year? In his dreams. Without me, I'd like to see what he could actually accomplish. I threw myself back into intense study. In my last life, even though my family weighed me down, I'd never stopped learning, so picking up again wasn't too difficult. I woke at 5 a.m., slept at 11 p.m., tired but fulfilled. My life was no longer the kind where I opened my eyes to my child and closed them in the kitchen, with nothing beyond that. The red crosses on my test papers grew fewer and fewer. On my birthday, I planned to buy myself a cake, but unexpectedly ran into Michael and Emily Quinn, who was smiling up at him with bashful sweetness. Back then, I had rented the apartment near his school to make it convenient for him to visit. Now, thinking about it, it just felt unlucky. Emily spotted me first. Emily Quinn seemed to raise her voice on purpose, calling out, "Michael, Michael," over and over as she clung to him, asking him to buy her a cake. Michael Carter rubbed her hair helplessly. "All right, I'll buy it for you." Seeing that scene, it would be a lie to say I felt nothing. In my previous life at this time, a cream-frosted cake was considered a rare treat. I'd always had a sweet tooth, and since it happened to be my birthday, and Michael had just received a bonus, I asked him to buy a small one. I even took time off from the factory, cooked a full table of his favorite dishes in my rented apartment, and waited for him to come after class. Michael came home late that day, but what he brought wasn't a cake, just a cold roasted sweet potato. "Natalie, times are tight right now. A cake isn't as worthwhile as a sweet potato. Don't you love these the most? They're both sweet. What's the difference?" Even though I was disappointed, I didn't show it. I even convinced myself he was right, blaming myself for wasting money. It wasn't until much later, reading his diary, that I learned he hadn't bought me a cake because he had no money left. He had spent his entire bonus on a cake, a dress, and fashionable lipstick for Emily Quinn's birthday that same day. For me, there had only been a cheap sweet potato from a roadside vendor. Sweet potatoes were cheap, and in his eyes, so was I. But my worth isn't for him to decide. It was just a cake. If I wanted one, I could buy it myself. I walked right up, ignoring everyone else, and took the most expensive cream cake in the shop. Michael finally noticed me, looking a bit pleased. "Natalie, you've come around?" I glanced at him like he was an idiot, then walked straight out with the cake. Halfway down the street, he grabbed my arm. "Who are you buying the cake for?" I rolled my eyes and kept walking, not bothering to answer. But he wouldn't let it go. "Not long ago I told you the food at the repeat year class was terrible, and you didn't care. Now you're wasting money on a cake." I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "And yet here you are buying a cake yourself. Looks like you're doing fine." Michael coughed awkwardly and mumbled, "Today's Emily's birthday. What's wrong with me buying a cake for the birthday girl?" Seeing his obvious attempt to cover the truth, I gave a cold smile. "Today is my birthday too." Michael froze, his grip on my hand loosening. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" I pulled my hand away. "I celebrate my own birthday. It's not like I haven't told you before." Emily, still holding onto Michael's arm, spoke in a sugary tone. "Sis, what a coincidence. Why don't we celebrate together?" I sneered. "Do I look that shameless, spending time with people of such questionable character?" Emily's eyes reddened, her voice trembling as she tried to look pitiful. "Sis, even if you don't like me, you don't have to slander me like this." When Michael saw Emily in tears, he immediately jumped to defend her. Emily is a good girl. Your mind is truly filthy. I curved my lips into a faint smile. A good girl wouldn't sleep in the same bed with someone who already has a girlfriend. My voice was just loud enough for the people around us to hear. Heads turned, eyes landing on Michael and Emily. Their faces instantly went pale. Michael scrambled to explain. Don't make things up. I gave a short huff and strode through the crowd to the counter. Michael, seeing I was ignoring him, snatched the cake from my hands. Natalie, are you even listening to me? I stared past him like he was nothing but air. The cashier, thinking Michael intended to pay, announced the price. Michael's tightly pressed lips twitched. Why is it so expensive? The cashier politely replied, Sir, this cake is made with imported cream, and the fruit is the freshest available. Michael hesitated. Before, with me covering all his tuition, living expenses, and materials fees, he never had to worry about money. But now, without me, that little bonus of his wasn't enough. The people waiting in line grew impatient, telling Michael Carter to hurry up. Emily Quinn tugged at his arm, urging, Michael, I really want that one. Hurry up and pay. Once Emily spoke, Michael was stuck with no way out. Gritting his teeth, he bought it. I couldn't help but smile, then picked up a brand new cake that had just come out, curious to see how long he could keep up the act of showing off. There were still 5 months left until the college entrance exam, and I was enjoying a calm, focused period of study. Then Michael's homeroom teacher came to find me. Without my supervision, he had already skipped 3 consecutive mock tests, and his scores had dropped badly. The teacher was clearly worried. You're Michael's cousin, right? This kid's been dating lately, and he's even skipped tests just to buy his girlfriend lipstick. At this rate, it's no good. He's the strongest student in the entire repeat year class, the one I've been focusing on. But if this keeps up, forget Peking University, he won't even make it into a technical school in Beijing. I calmly corrected the teacher. You're mistaken. I'm not his cousin. The teacher frowned. That's how he introduced you to me before. I let out a cold laugh. I didn't say anything because I was afraid you'd find it ridiculous. I'm his ex-girlfriend. The teacher froze, then looked embarrassed. Michael always seemed like such a good student? I shrugged. You can't judge people by appearances. You're a responsible teacher. But everyone has their own fate. Whether he gets into college or what kind of life he leads afterward, that's his choice. The teacher sighed after a pause. It's a pity. The girl he's dating is also in my class. She's pretty, but definitely not the well-behaved type. I've tried to talk sense into her several times, but she refuses to break up. How did Michael end up with her? I forced a small smile. Yeah, how did he end up with her? Sometimes, good advice can't save someone determined to ruin themselves. The teacher kept sighing, and once he knew the truth, he didn't linger. But before leaving, he asked, So, who's going to pay Michael's materials fee? He's the only one in the class who hasn't paid, and the school's pressing for it. I asked him, and he said you'd cover it. I really don't know what else to do. I gave him a troubled look. And why exactly should I be the one to pay for him? The teacher opened his mouth but said nothing, finally shaking his head and leaving. A month later, Michael did something rare. He actually waited for me outside my door. The moment he opened his mouth, it was to demand, Natalie Bennett, you quit your job at the factory? I kept my hands in my pockets. Do I need to report it to you if I quit the factory? Michael's tone was full of self-righteousness. You promised to cover my repeat year expenses. If you've quit, where's the income to keep your word? My materials fee has been overdue for months. Are you trying to embarrass me on purpose? Shameless. If there was ever a word made for someone, it was for him. Michael, I agreed to support your repeat year because I wanted a future with you, but you cheated on me. So why should I keep giving? The word cheated made him bristle like a cat with its fur ripped out. He instantly raised his voice. Natalie, Emily and I are just friends. Stop making a scene. As if shouting louder made someone right. My voice was sharp as crushed ice. I never said who it was. You're the one rushing to announce it. Color drained from his face, then returned in blotches. Sometimes, I really didn't understand men like him, liking someone else, yet still clinging to an ex they refused to let go of. Michael's voice softened. What ex? We never broke up. I smirked. And who told you that? We're not married. What right do you have to tie me down? He finally heard the finality in my tone. Staring at me blankly, he asked, You really want to break up with me? When he said it, there was actually a flicker of unease in his eyes. I didn't hesitate. Let's break up. You don't have me in your heart anymore, and I feel filthy just being near you. I opened the door to go inside, but he grabbed me in a panic. No, that's not true. I do have you in my heart. The man who had just been shouting at me suddenly changed his tone, probably because he finally realized he could no longer act like he had nothing to fear. His voice was hoarse, as if I were the one who had cheated. We've known each other for over 10 years. How can you just say it's over? Didn't you say you'd love me forever? Liar. I sighed. I'm just tired, Michael. You're the one who made us like this. And besides, if you won't break up with me, then what exactly is Emily Quinn to you? I may despise you, but I still know enough to give my whole heart to just one person. Michael lowered his head and muttered, The money I owe you, I'll pay it back. The door lock turned as I stepped inside without looking back. After that talk, he came to see me a few more times. It was as if he'd suddenly learned to behave, bringing me pastries, study materials, but I either gave them to stray cats or handed them to homeless people. After a few tries, he stopped coming altogether. As the weather warmed, I changed into a new dress. The pages on the calendar above my desk grew fewer and fewer. My excitement slowly shifted to calm acceptance. I didn't have much confidence in getting into college, especially Peking University, but you only get one lifetime, and I'd already died once. What was there to be afraid of? With that mindset, I stepped into the college entrance exam room again. The words on the test paper danced like musical notes, and my heart felt lighter and lighter. The exam went smoothly, but the moment I walked out, I ran straight into Michael Carter and Emily Quinn. Enemies really do meet on a narrow road. Emily didn't bother hiding anymore. She laced her fingers tightly with his right in front of me. What a coincidence, running into you again. Michael's gaze flickered with a hint of discomfort. How did you do? The questions were tricky this year, but don't feel bad. If you need another year, I don't mind helping you. He was about to say more when Emily pinched him, and I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. I heard you failed most of your mock exams before the college entrance test. Instead of worrying about me, maybe you should worry about yourself. Emily's eyes curved as she smiled politely. Michael was just being kind, trying to comfort you because you've known each other so long. If you don't appreciate it, then there's nothing more we can do. Michael seemed to want to speak to me again, but without Emily's approval, he said nothing. I, however, had stopped caring long ago. When the osmanthus in the courtyard bloomed, I received my admission letter to the finance department at Peking University, a thin sheet of paper carrying the hopes of 2 lifetimes. I wiped away my tears and ran to the old man at the phone booth to share the good news. His eyes crinkled into a slit as he grinned. Natalie, you've really made something of yourself. Such a fine young woman. He laughed, and I laughed with him. That night, I cooked a full table of good dishes to thank him. In the past, I'd been alone, afraid of solitude and separation, so I made Michael my whole world. Now, even if the only person I could share my good news with was the old man at the booth, I still felt full and content. Toward the end of the meal, he suddenly pulled an envelope from his pocket. Almost forgot about this. I took it and found a neat stack of bills inside. Michael came by today, the old man said. But he didn't go in to see you, just gave me this and left. I nodded and pulled the money out of the envelope. Counting it, it was twice the amount I had ever spent on him. With this sum, I didn't have to worry about tuition or living expenses for a while. The old man, seeing me go quiet, spoke cautiously. When Michael came by today, he didn't look well. I heard he didn't do well on the exam. I had already expected as much, so I felt nothing. His adoptive father's been seriously ill lately, the old man continued. After being discharged from the hospital, he couldn't even recognize people anymore. I don't think Michael will be going to college anytime soon. I tucked the envelope away and gave a faint, I ended the lease on my apartment, packed my belongings, and boarded the train to Beijing. This time around, I finally stepped across the threshold of Peking University. Even after the long journey, my heart stayed full of excitement. I went through enrollment, found my dorm, set up my bed, made new friends, and explored the campus. Everything was new to me. The buildings, the paths, the air itself. My roommates laughed at how amazed I seemed over every little thing, but I only smiled. In my previous life, around this same time, I had been to Peking University once before, taking the chance to deliver Michael Carter's luggage. That day I was dressed in dull, worn clothes, carrying a burlap sack, lingering at the gate for a long time. Through that iron gate, it felt as if I were staring at two completely different lives. I had asked him if he could take me inside just for a look. He frowned and said, "Dad needs someone to take care of him. If you don't go back soon, he'll start making a fuss." So I swallowed my longing and hurried away. But now, I didn't need his permission. I had walked in openly, under my own power. This time, I was determined to make it to Peking University, not only to fill the regret of my past life, but for another reason, to build connections. Most of my roommates and classmates were top talents from their provinces with well-off families. Once I had adapted to campus life, I began learning securities trading through their networks. The stock market was turbulent that year, but volatility often meant opportunity. Using my knowledge from my previous life and my quick reactions, I earned a substantial profit and briefly became a well-known figure in the department. Even the advisor who hadn't supported me before praised me for having sharp market instincts and being a woman as capable as any man. I split my earnings into 3 parts, one for savings, one for starting a business, and one to continue trading. My plans for the future became clearer and clearer. Not only would I become a top professional, I would also become a top-tier entrepreneur. While things were going exceptionally well for me, Michael's side of life had taken a turn for the worse. We'd long since stopped any contact, but that didn't stop him from coming to Beijing to attend a technical secondary school. Beijing had many schools, but student gossip traveled fast. He was the only married student among them, a rarity. Word was that one day his wife showed up at his class, dragged him all the way to the playground demanding money. "You promised to buy me a necklace. I've been waiting back home for 2 months, and you still haven't sent it. Do you have someone else out here?" My roommate reenacted the scene perfectly for me. That girl was fierce, slapped him right across the face, split his lip. Then she asked where his father was, and he couldn't answer. She pressed him until he skipped class and ran off. I raised an eyebrow. "And then?" My roommate took a sip of water, then said, "I heard his dad drowned in a lake. Been dead for 2 months. His wife kept it from him this whole time." I couldn't help but feel a pang of irony. It seemed Michael had tried to treat Emily Quinn the same way he had treated me in my past life. Coming to Beijing for school and leaving her at home to care for his adoptive father with Alzheimer's. But Emily was never going to quietly look after an old man. His adoptive father had been a good person, but thanks to Michael, he couldn't even have peace in his final years. The old man was pitiful, but Michael had brought this all on himself. After all, he had chosen her. The path he chose was his own. Who else could he blame? That winter break, I returned to the welfare home to visit the director, even donating some money to improve the children's living conditions. The director was touched and kept me talking until it was dark. At one point, he brought up Michael Carter, wearing a look of deep disappointment. "You both grew up here. How did he end up like this?" He then shared some updates about Michael. After Emily Quinn's outburst at his school, he'd felt humiliated, dropped out, and returned to his hometown. Everyone thought he had gone back to arrange his adoptive father's funeral, but instead, he fought Emily over the old man's house. The old man had worked himself to the bone raising him, and yet Michael's behavior left people chilled. After this, who would dare adopt from the welfare home again? The director sighed. I asked, though I already suspected. "So, who ended up with the house?" The director gave a mocking laugh. Emily used the child she was carrying to threaten him. After Michael gave her the house, she turned around and got rid of the baby. Then, in the middle of the night, she sold the house and disappeared. I raised my brows, almost thinking Emily had done the right thing. The director shook his head. "Back then, you and he were so close that you even took the college entrance exam twice for him. I thought you two would last, but he couldn't handle his own good fortune. Still, a man like that isn't worthy of you. You're doing very well now. If they try to contact you. I shook my head. Actually, Michael has written me several letters over the past couple of years. He said he misses me, said I'm the one who really suits him, admitted he was blind before. I didn't reply to a single one, threw them all straight into the trash. After leaving the welfare home, I went to the supermarket to buy a small cake. The kind of thing I once couldn't bear to spend money on was now part of my everyday life. As usual, I chose the most expensive one. But at the checkout, I ran into Michael Carter making a delivery. He wore a yellowed cotton jacket, his face unshaven. The only thing he'd ever had going for him, his looks, was long gone. I, on the other hand, wore a stylish camel coat and leather shoes, the contrast making him look even more pitiful. He didn't recognize me until I spoke. "Michael," I said as I tucked away my change, cake in hand, ready to head back to my hotel. He stepped in front of me. "Did you come back to find me?" I frowned, covering my nose. "Don't flatter yourself. Stay away from me." Michael froze, then stepped back awkwardly. "Sorry, I've just been so busy with work, I haven't had time to take care of myself." I had no interest in pointless conversation and strode past him, but he suddenly called out, "Natalie Bennett, I regret it. I picked the wrong person back then. You're my real love. After all these years together, you really won't take me back?" His voice trembled, almost breaking into sobs. Now he knew how to cry? Where was this when it mattered? I looked over my shoulder. "No, I don't regret leaving you. In fact, I think it's the best decision I've ever made in my life." Michael's tears fell harder, his shoulders shaking. I smiled faintly. "There's no medicine for regret, so I hope I'll always live in a way that